Hey, it's Kevin DeWitt here. Welcome to another plugin knowledge session. This week we're going to have a look at Neutron, the gate module. So this is a continuation on my previous plugin knowledge sessions where we were looking at the other components of iZotope Neutron. But this week we are going to look at the gate module specifically. So we're going to see how much power it has, how useful it is, and what we can actually do with it. So let's get stuck into it. So as with everything else in Neutron, we can obviously turn this on and off. We can move it around to wherever we like, and we can blend a certain component of it in or all of it. We can load some presets here. So we've got some presets, as you can see, kick drum gate, snare gate, various things like that might be handy. And all of our controls are very similar to pretty much every other control in Neutron, which is very handy. So again, this has the potential to be either a single band as it is in its default state, or it can be a multi-band gate, which will be very interesting because that means we can gate certain frequencies at different levels. So hopefully you understand the fundamentals of using a gate. So I'm not going to go into too great a detail about how to use a gate as such, but we will just run over it a little bit. So at the moment we've got it in a single band, as I said, that's the default state. And we can turn bands on and off with this button here. We can bypass and we can solo a band. We've got our threshold here. So this is setting the level at which we are going to have the gates kick in or open up. And we've got a ratio which is going to affect basically how hard the gate is going to hit. So I guess they've set it up very similar to a compressor in this one because, I mean, a gate sort of is a compressor in a way. But I guess in this state here, it means that it's not going to necessarily shut the gate entirely and get rid of all of the signal. And you'd be looking at going up something like that. So this is going to be interesting to see what these settings actually do and how they react. So we've got our attack, which is going to set how fast it's going to get applied, and a release, how quickly we're going to let go. We can also set up a side chain if we wanted to external, internal, anything like that. And we can turn on other bands and obviously set our crossover points of what each individual gate is going to do. Okay, so with the threshold setting, as with any other gate here, when the signal goes above this threshold, it opens the gate up and lets the signal through. As soon as the signal falls below this setting, the gate closes and the signal is chopped off. So we've got a hysteresis, I think that's how you say it, setting here, which I'm trying to fully understand. It's a little bit confusing to me, I guess, at this stage. But they refer to it as being a second threshold for the gate. And it only applies to closing the gate. So you've got 0 to 30 dB. And what they're saying is if you set it to, say, 30 dB, that is 30 dB lower than the threshold. So once the audio signal goes below this threshold, in theory, it should close. If it goes below this threshold, it also is closed. If the signal goes above this threshold, it does not open the gate unless it's gone above this threshold. And if you set the hysteresis to 0, it basically disables this setting altogether. I've read this 4 times and it doesn't quite make sense to me of what the point of it is. The gate's already closed down here. I don't know why you need a second value to close it again or continue to close it. and have a setting that if it goes above that, it doesn't open until it goes above this. So I guess it's one of those things we're going to have to just try and see if we can work it out, because I have no idea. And the hold control here basically determines how long the gate will stay open so when the signal goes below the threshold, how long we will hold that gate open for after the signal goes below the threshold. Now it sort of correlates a little bit with the release. The release sort of does that as well, but this is a specific time that we just hold the gate open altogether, as opposed to the release, which is sort of just fading it out at the end. So as for the controls, it's very similar to most other gates. As I said, the ratio is a little bit different. Normally with a gate, we probably have a range or something like that. And this one in regards to has a ratio. Now, also normally you generally have an infinity setting, so that the absolute silence when the gate kicks in. So I'm interested to see how this plays out, this control here as well. So I think what we'll do is we'll go back to our default settings. Now there's also a learn function here as well. So this again should determine the crossover points that it suggests for the audio signal once it listens to it. So we'll also play with that as well. So let's start off with a single band here. I'm going to reset everything to default. And first off, I'm going to actually disable this so you can hear the drum track. So it's basically a kick with a bit of bleed in there. You can hear the snare. Okay, so now we'll kick it in a default setting. And we're basically doing nothing at the moment because our threshold is quite low. So let's take that up. Okay, so that's pretty much taking out majority of the snares and is leaving our kick. Got a nice little picture here, which is quite handy, so we can get a visual representation of what we're seeing, and obviously a graph here. I really like this though, because you can actually see obviously the hits that are being passed. So we're getting a little bit of ghost notes coming through, but it's not too bad. So if we change our attack, we're starting to get a little bit of distortion there. And if we go too long, we're not opening quick enough and the transient of the kick is not getting through. And with the release, if we go too short, you can even see the visual representation. We're chopping the end of the kick off. And if we go too long, then we're not gating out the snare because we are not closing the gate at all. Pretty much it's staying open the entire time, as you can see. And we'll try and get that nice balance of keeping that low end of the kick rumbling out, not being chopped off, and not letting too much snare through. And the hold setting, we start to see a flat line, which is how long it's holding it open for. and we turn it off there. Now, so I'm not sure, like I said, what this hysteresis one does. So for some reason, when I actually raise that, the gate stays open for a bit longer. So I'm not quite getting what this does. It's a really weird description. I'm not sure if the manual's really explaining this very well, but the last sentence in the manual states that you should set your threshold so that the gate gates all unwanted signals, then turn the hysteresis value to reduce unwanted gating. So what we're seeing here is what they're describing that it does, but their description about it being closed and open just doesn't make any sense to me. So in theory, what they're saying is get it to get rid of all the sounds you don't want, and then turn this up, I guess, so that it's a little bit more natural. Something like that. Anyway, let's try the ratio control here. So obviously 1 to 1, it's doing nothing. So it's basically as it describes. And the higher you go, the more reduction that it creates and clamps down. But in this case here, I don't know if it'll work differently with other things, but it seems very sensitive. Like you've only got this little tiny bit of movement and then it's just off. So if we bypass, obviously we get that. So let's have a look at adding in some bands here. So let's add in all three. I'm going to play the track and we'll get it to do a bit of a learn function and we'll see what it recommends. Okay, so it's decided that 248 Hz should be the first crossover and 5.77K should be the next one. So we can solo each band individually. And I guess we can really clamp down on this low end to get it to exactly what we want. Well, the low end itself may be the one that you actually want to relax a little bit and let a little bit through to make sure that kick rings out a bit more. Okay, so this is obviously this section, middle one here, which I've just soloed, is more the click of the kick and obviously the snares in there as well. So we've got most of the snare out there. We're just getting that click, which we can probably keep quite short because it is just a click. Maybe not that much. So in this case, I've just added a tiny little bit of hold just to allow that little bit of body in the click to come through. You can hear we've pretty much got rid of all of the snare in this section. That's what it was before. And then the top end here, obviously this is a kick. It's just the very tip of it. So I don't even know if I would worry too much about this. Don't really hear any snare in it anyway. So that's what we have now with these settings. So if I bypass each one at a time, we can hear what impact each one has. So the top one has very little impact, as I would expect. So massive impact on the middle. And a fairly big impact on the low as well. And then if we bypass the entire plugin, so there you go. That's very powerful. Use of the multi-bands is very useful. Definitely gives you a lot greater control because, you know, if you had, in this case here, we've got a kick that's got quite a clicky sound to it, but if you had a very low end sort of roundish kick that didn't have much of a click to it, you know, you could almost dial that in to be sitting down under this band here, and then that you could gate to however you like, or you may not gate it at all because there may be nothing else down there. If you had a very thin snare but a very deep kick, they might be fairly isolated and you might not need to gate the low end at all. So that means you allow all your kick through, but you gate severely the middle point here, which then gets rid of all of the snare or any hi-hats or anything like that by using these two. You know, you could obviously disable that one there if you wanted to and just attack this top end as one big unit. So if we had some hi-hat and snare in there, we could gate this section out here, and we could actually leave this in bypass and not gate this at all. Now you need to leave it on because otherwise this will take over the whole range. But if we turn this one on, we have two bands on, and we bypass this band, then we don't gate this section at all, and we're only gating this section. Okay, sorry. I was wondering why it was sounding so thin, but it was because I had this in solo. So I'll just show you that again. So we could have, so if we bring, these are both with them both in, but you might say, let's bypass the low end. Now, obviously in this case, we are hearing some low end of the snare. You could go lower, or you could take it higher. And because we've got this bypassed, we're allowing all the low end to go through without gating it at all. Nothing at all. And we're just gating this whole top section. So very useful from that perspective. Plus we can have all of these different settings, different amounts of threshold, different amounts of gating. So, you know, you might want to have some gating in all of the bands, but you want to change how much. So you want to be a little bit more restrictive in one than the other, or a little bit less restrictive in one or the other, however you want to do it. One, you might want to have a faster attack, slower release, or opposite way around, a bit more ratio, less ratio, whatever you want, hold, hysteresis, whatever you need to do, you can do that. So very powerful, very useful gate there. Extremely good one. So I'll be looking at that one in my mixes going forward as well. So that's the gate module of iZotope Neutron. Thank you for watching. Hopefully it's been helpful. Go and check it out in the link below, and try it out on your next mix and see what you think. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.